They called him crazy for spending his last $100 on Marilyn Monroe's crumbling mansion. But when his German Shepherd started clawing through the bedroom floor, Reid uncovered a secret that Hollywood's most powerful men had buried for 60 years. The rain fell steady and cold over Brentwood the night Reid pulled his rusted pickup truck onto a street he never thought he'd see. Stone walls lined both sides, hiding estates that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The kind of neighborhood where security cameras followed strangers and neighbors called the police if your car looked too old or your clothes too worn. Marcus didn't belong here. He knew it. The real estate agent who sold him the property knew it. And judging by the way curtains twitched in nearby windows as he drove past, the neighbors knew it too. Beside him in the passenger seat, Atlas sat perfectly still, ears forward, watching the road with the same disciplined focus he'd shown in Afghanistan. The German Shepherd's reflection caught in the rain-streaked window, dark eyes alert, body coiled with the kind of readiness that never fully left dogs trained for war. Marcus reached over and scratched behind the dog's ear, feeling Atlas lean into his hand for just a moment before returning his gaze to the street ahead. "We made it, boy," Marcus murmured, though his voice carried no celebration. Just exhaustion. Just the hollow relief of a man who'd run out of road and finally found a place to stop. The address matched the faded numbers on the rusted gate. 12305, 5th Helena Drive. Even in the dark, even through the rain, Marcus could see the mansion was dying. The Spanish colonial revival architecture that once drew photographers and admirers now sagged under decades of neglect. Stucco walls crumbled in patches, revealing the bones beneath. Red tile roofing had slipped and broken, leaving gaps like missing teeth. The front gate hung crooked, one hinge completely rusted through. But it was the silence that struck him most. In a neighborhood humming with wealth and life, this property sat like a tomb. No lights in the windows. No cars in the driveway. No sound except rain drumming against broken gutters and palm fronds scraping the walls in the wind. Marcus killed the engine. The sudden quiet felt oppressive, pressing against his chest the way silence always did since he came home. Atlas whined softly, sensing the shift in Marcus's breathing. "I'm okay," Marcus whispered, though they both knew it was only half true. He stepped out into the rain. Atlas jumped down beside him, immediately moving into position at Marcus's left side, the way he'd been trained. Together they approached the gate. Marcus pulled the keys from his pocket, the metal cold and unfamiliar in his palm. The real estate lawyer had handed them over that morning with an expression somewhere between pity and confusion. "Mr. Reid, I have to ask one more time. Are you certain about this purchase? The property requires extensive repairs. The foundation alone." "I'm certain," Marcus had said, cutting him off. He didn't explain that $100 was all he had left. Didn't mention that his disability check wouldn't come for another week, or that he'd been sleeping in his truck for the past month because every apartment required deposits he couldn't afford. Didn't say that when he saw the listing for Marilyn Monroe's abandoned estate, selling for $100 because the legal battles over ownership had dragged on so long that the city just wanted it gone. Something in him recognized it as a last chance. The gate screamed as he pushed it open, metal scraping against concrete. Atlas went through first, nose low, sweeping the overgrown courtyard in systematic passes. The dog moved with purpose, checking corners, testing shadows, his training as sharp as the day they'd left Kandahar together. Marcus followed more slowly. His right leg ached from the shrapnel still embedded too close to the bone for surgeons to risk removing. Every step sent a dull throb up his thigh, a constant reminder of the IED that had killed 3 of his brothers and left him and Atlas as the only survivors of their unit. The front door was worse than the gate. Wood rotted through in places, the brass handle tarnished black. When Marcus turned the key, the lock fought him, rust grinding against rust, before finally giving way with a crack that echoed through the empty house. The door swung inward, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled of mildew, dust, and something else. Something faintly sweet and chemical, like old perfume left too long in a closed room. Atlas stopped at the threshold, hackles rising slightly. A low rumble built in his chest. Marcus placed a hand on the dog's back. "What is it?" Atlas didn't growl at empty rooms. Didn't raise his hackles at shadows. Something about this place triggered the same instincts that had saved their lives overseas. the same awareness that distinguished safe spaces from danger zones. Marcus pulled out his flashlight. The beam cut through darkness thick as smoke, illuminating a grand entry hall that might have been beautiful once. A curved staircase swept upward to the second floor, its banister carved with intricate details now hidden under layers of grime. Marble floors, cracked and stained, stretched toward doorways leading deeper into the mansion. Crown molding clung to the ceiling in places and hung loose in others, like old skin refusing to let go. But what stopped Marcus cold was the furniture. It was still here, all of it, covered in sheets gone gray with age and damp, but present, as if the owner had only stepped out for a moment 60 years ago and never returned. Jesus, Marcus breathed. He moved into the entry hall, Atlas pressed against his leg. Their footsteps echoed, each sound bouncing back from too many empty rooms. Marcus swept the flashlight slowly, taking inventory. A grand piano in what must have been the living room. Bookshelves still filled with books, their spines swollen with moisture. Framed photographs on the walls, faces obscured by decades of dust on the glass. The electricity was dead. Water was shut off. Heat non-existent. But the house held a strange presence, as if it were waiting. Watching. Remembering. Atlas moved toward the staircase and sat down hard, staring upward into the darkness of the second floor. His tail didn't wag. His posture remained rigid, alert. Then he looked back at Marcus with an expression the veteran had learned to read over 5 years of partnership. Something's up there. Not tonight, boy, Marcus said quietly. Let's check the ground floor first. But Atlas didn't move. He whined, a high, insistent sound, then pawed at the bottom step. Marcus's pulse kicked up. In Afghanistan, when Atlas acted like this, it meant one of two things: explosives or ambush. The dog's nose had saved their convoy more times than Marcus could count, detecting IEDs before they tore through armored vehicles, sensing enemy presence before bullets started flying. But this wasn't Afghanistan. This was Brentwood. This was an abandoned mansion that had sat empty for decades while lawyers argued over whether it belonged to the estate, the studio, or the city. Still, Marcus trusted Atlas more than he trusted his own instincts. All right, he murmured. Show me. Atlas bounded up the stairs, surprisingly agile for a dog who'd taken shrapnel in his hindquarters during the same blast that wounded Marcus. The veteran followed more carefully, testing each step before putting his full weight down. Some groaned. Some felt soft, the wood rotting from the inside. The second-floor hallway stretched in both directions, doors lining both sides like cells in a prison. Atlas turned right without hesitation, moving past closed doors until he reached the last one at the end of the hall. He sat in front of it and barked once, sharp and clear. Marcus approached slowly. The door was different from the others. Heavier. Reinforced. The kind of door that didn't belong in a bedroom hallway. The kind that suggested whatever lay beyond needed protection or secrecy or both. He tried the handle. Locked. He pulled out the key ring, trying each one until the fourth key slid home. The lock turned with surprising smoothness, as if it had been maintained long after everything else fell into disrepair. The door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Marcus shone his flashlight inside, and his breath caught. The room beyond wasn't destroyed like the rest of the house. It was pristine, preserved. A bedroom frozen in 1962, the year Marilyn Monroe died, in this very house. A four-poster bed dominated the center, its white silk sheets still tucked neatly despite the decades. A vanity sat against the far wall, bottles and compacts arranged as if their owner might return any moment. Photographs in silver frames covered every surface. Marilyn with Joe DiMaggio. Marilyn with Arthur Miller. Marilyn alone, smiling that famous smile that never quite reached her eyes. But it was the walls that made Marcus's skin prickle. Every inch was covered in papers. Documents, letters, photographs, newspaper clippings, all pinned and taped and arranged in patterns that suggested meaning, purpose, obsession. Red string connected some items to others, creating a web that covered 3 walls completely. Atlas padded into the room, nose working overtime, pulling in scents invisible to Marcus. The dog moved to the center of the room and sat down hard, staring at a specific section of floor beneath the bed. Marcus knelt beside him. What view you got? Atlas pawed the floor 3 times, then looked up at Marcus with an intensity that sent a chill down the veteran's spine. Marcus bent lower, shining his light across the floorboards. At first he saw nothing unusual. Just old hardwood, warped slightly with age. Then Atlas pawed again, and Marcus noticed it. A seam, barely visible, running in a perfect rectangle beneath where the bed frame rested. His hands shook slightly as he pushed the heavy bed aside. It scraped across the floor with a sound like a scream swallowed too long. With the bed moved, the rectangle became obvious. A hidden panel, cut so precisely into the floor that it vanished when furniture covered it. Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears. He'd felt this sensation before, in the seconds before breaching a door in Kandahar, never knowing what waited on the other side. Fear and anticipation twisted together until they became indistinguishable. He wedged his fingers into the seam and pulled. The panel resisted, then lifted suddenly, revealing a dark space beneath. Cold air rushed out, carrying a scent that made Atlas back up 3 steps, a low whine escaping his throat. Marcus shone his flashlight down into the opening. A ladder descended into darkness. Not a crawl space, not a small hiding spot. A ladder leading down into something vast enough that his flashlight beam couldn't find the bottom. What the hell? Marcus whispered. He sat back on his heels, mind racing. The mansion's blueprints hadn't shown any basement. The property records mentioned no underground construction. Yet here was a shaft dropping into the earth beneath Marilyn Monroe's bedroom, hidden for 60 years. Atlas whined again, pressing his body against Marcus's side, not in fear but in warning. The same warning he'd given in those final seconds before the IED detonated. The same warning that meant danger was close, real, and immediate. Marcus looked at his dog, then at the opening, then at the room around them. The preserved bedroom, the wall of documents, the locked door that shouldn't have been so well maintained. Someone had kept this room secret. Someone had made sure it stayed untouched while the rest of the mansion rotted. And someone had hidden something so important beneath Marilyn Monroe's bed that they'd built an entire underground chamber to contain it. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him. He pulled it out. 1 bar of signal. A text from the VA clinic reminding him of his missed appointment that afternoon. He dismissed it and checked the time. 11:47 p.m. He should wait until morning. Should call someone. Should do anything except climb down into an unknown space in an abandoned mansion in the middle of the night. But who would he call? The police? They'd ask questions he couldn't answer about why a homeless veteran was trespassing in a property he'd bought for $100. The VA? They'd schedule another appointment he couldn't make because he had no address, no transportation, no stability. No, he and Atlas were alone in this. The way they'd been alone since the blast. The way they'd been alone since Marcus came home to find his wife gone, his marriage dissolved in his absence, his future as empty as this mansion. Atlas looked up at him with those dark, steady eyes. The dog had followed him through hell, had pulled him from a burning Humvee, had stayed by his hospital bed for 3 months while Marcus learned to walk again, had slept beside him in the truck when nowhere else would take them both. If Atlas sensed danger below, Marcus trusted that. But if Atlas was willing to go down, then so was Marcus. "All right, boy," Marcus said softly. "Let's see what she was hiding." He tested the first rung. Solid. The ladder was metal, cold and slightly damp, but well anchored. He descended slowly, Atlas waiting at the top, whining with increasing urgency. The shaft was deep. 10 feet. 15. 20. Marcus's flashlight beam finally hit bottom, revealing a concrete floor and the edge of what looked like a reinforced steel door. His boots touched ground. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees. His breath misted in the beam of his flashlight. The walls around him weren't natural earth, but poured concrete, smooth and professional. This wasn't something dug hastily. This was engineered, built to last, built to hide something worth hiding. Atlas barked from above, sharp and commanding. "Stay," Marcus called up. "I'll come back for you." But Atlas had never been good at staying when Marcus went into danger. The dog appeared at the top of the ladder, then began descending backward, paws finding each rung with surprising dexterity. "Stubborn bastard," Marcus muttered, but warmth flooded through him. He wasn't alone. Not completely. When Atlas reached the bottom, he immediately moved to the steel door and growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the confined space. Marcus approached the door slowly. No handle. No visible lock. Just a smooth steel surface set into the concrete wall. He ran his hands across it, feeling for any mechanism, any weakness. His fingers found a small indentation on the right side, barely larger than a keyhole. He pulled out his key ring again, trying each key. None fit. He stepped back, studying the door. Atlas sniffed along its edges, tail straight out behind him. Then Marcus noticed something. The wall beside the door, barely visible in the darkness, had a small metal box mounted at shoulder height. He opened it. Inside was a numerical keypad, ancient and covered in dust, but still glowing faintly with residual power. Someone had maintained this. Someone had kept power running to this hidden chamber decades after Marilyn Monroe died. Marcus's hands hovered over the keypad. He had no code, no idea what numbers might open this door. But as his flashlight swept across the keypad, he noticed something. For numbers were more worn than the others, the paint rubbed away by repeated use. 1962. The year Marilyn died. Marcus pressed the numbers in sequence. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then a deep mechanical groan echoed through the shaft. The steel door shuddered, dust falling from its edges, and slowly began to swing inward. Cold air rushed out, colder than anything natural. Atlas backed up, hackles fully raised now, a continuous low growl rolling from his chest. Marcus shone his flashlight through the opening. What he saw made his heart stop. The chamber beyond was massive, easily the size of the entire mansion's footprint, carved out of the earth and reinforced with concrete and steel. But it wasn't empty. Gold bars, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, stacked in neat rows on industrial shelving that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each bar gleamed in his flashlight beam, stamped with markings he couldn't read from the doorway. But that wasn't all. Filing cabinets lined one wall, metal and gray, each drawer labeled with dates spanning the 1950s and early 1960s. A desk sat in the center of the chamber, and on it lay a leather journal, closed, waiting. Atlas wouldn't enter. The dog sat at the threshold, whining, every instinct telling him this place was wrong, dangerous, forbidden. Marcus felt it too. The weight of secrets. The presence of something that had been buried with purpose and protected with violence. This wasn't a treasure someone forgot. This was a treasure someone killed to hide. He stepped inside. The chamber's air tasted metallic, old, like breathing in history that didn't want to be disturbed. His footsteps echoed strangely, the sound absorbed by too much gold and too many secrets. Marcus approached the nearest shelf and lifted one of the bars. Heavy, real. He turned it over in his hands, and his breath caught. Stamped into the metal were words in small, precise lettering. Property of Monroe Estate. 1962. He set it down carefully and moved to the filing cabinets. The first drawer opened smoothly, revealing files organized with meticulous care. He pulled one at random. Inside were contracts, letters, photographs, all involving Marilyn Monroe and names Marcus recognized even decades later. Studio executives, producers, politicians, the president. His hands shook as he flipped through the papers. These weren't just documents. They were leverage, evidence, secrets that powerful men had thought died with Marilyn. Marcus moved to the desk and opened the journal. The first page was written in feminine handwriting, elegant but rushed, as if the writer feared running out of time. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. They'll say it was suicide. They'll say I was unstable. But I want someone to know the truth. I want someone to know what they did, what they took, what they're still taking. Marcus turned the page, heart pounding. The entries that followed detailed meetings, conversations, threats. Marilyn had recorded everything. Every promise broken, every betrayal, every time powerful men used her and discarded her. And she'd kept proof. Recordings, photographs, financial records showing payments made to silence her, to control her, to own her. The final entry was dated August 4th, 1962. The day she died. They're coming. I can hear them outside. I've hidden everything they want, everything that proves what they are. If I don't survive tonight, then maybe someone else will find this someday. Someone brave enough to make them answer for what they've done. Marcus closed the journal carefully, hands trembling. He looked around the chamber with new understanding. This wasn't just hidden wealth. This was Marilyn Monroe's insurance policy. Her final act of defiance. She'd taken everything Hollywood's most powerful men feared and buried it beneath her bedroom floor, protected it with codes and steel and secrets, and died knowing that someday someone might find it. Atlas barked urgently from the doorway. The sound echoed strangely, and beneath it, Marcus heard something else. Footsteps. Above them. In the mansion. His blood ran cold. He'd locked the front gate. Locked the front door. No one should be able to get in. Unless they had keys. Unless they'd been watching. Unless they knew what was hidden here and had been waiting 60 years for someone to open that door again. Marcus killed his flashlight instantly, plunging the chamber into darkness. Atlas's growls intensified. The footsteps above moved with purpose, multiple people, spreading through the house, searching. Marcus crept toward the doorway, every nerve firing. His legs screamed where the shrapnel bit deep, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside. He reached Atlas and placed a hand on the dog's back, feeling the tension coiled in every muscle. The footsteps had reached the second floor. A voice called out, male, authoritative, accustomed to obedience. Search every room. He opened the chamber. The sensor triggered. Sensor. Marcus's stomach dropped. The door had been monitored. The moment he'd entered the code, someone had been alerted. Someone who'd been waiting decades for this moment. Atlas pulled against Marcus's grip, every instinct telling him to attack, to defend, to eliminate the threat. But Marcus held firm. They were outnumbered. Trapped underground. No weapons. No backup. No way out except through people who'd killed once to protect these secrets and would kill again. The footsteps stopped directly above them. In Marilyn's bedroom. Someone spoke, voice muffled by distance but clear enough to understand. The panel's open. Someone's down there. A second voice responded, deeper, colder. Seal it. We'll deal with whoever it is when they come up for air. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor echoed down the shaft. They were covering the entrance, trapping Marcus and Atlas in a tomb beneath a mansion that had already kept too many secrets. Atlas's growl became a snarl. Marcus pulled him back into the chamber, mind racing. The door was still open behind them. Could he close it? Would it lock from the inside? And even if it did, what then? They had no food, no water, no way to call for help with no cell signal this far underground. But as his flashlight swept the chamber again, he noticed something he'd missed before. On the far wall, barely visible behind the shelving units. Another door. Smaller. Unmarked. Closed. A way out. Marilyn had built herself a way out. Marcus grabbed Atlas's collar and moved quickly toward the second door. Behind them, the sound of something heavy settling over the shaft opening. Then silence. Absolute. Final. They were sealed in. Marcus reached the door and pulled. Locked. But unlike the steel door behind them, this one had a simple deadbolt. He threw it open and pulled. The door swung inward, revealing a tunnel. Narrow. Dark. But breathable air flowed from somewhere ahead, carrying the scent of night and rain and freedom. Atlas didn't hesitate. The dog bolted into the tunnel, and Marcus followed, pulling the door shut behind them. He didn't know where this passage led. Didn't know if it would save them or just delay the inevitable. But Marilyn Monroe had survived in Hollywood long enough to build this escape route, and Marcus Reid had survived Afghanistan long enough to trust a dead woman's paranoia. They ran into darkness, footsteps echoing, Atlas's breathing steady beside him, both of them fleeing secrets that had waited 60 years to swallow someone whole. Behind them, in the chamber full of gold and evidence and truth, the silence held its breath. Waiting, watching, recording. And somewhere above, in the mansion that had already claimed one life, powerful men realized they'd made a mistake. They'd sealed the veteran inside. But they'd forgotten about the dog. And they'd forgotten that some men, once cornered, stop running and start fighting. The tunnel stretched endlessly, walls pressing close enough that Marcus's shoulders brushed concrete on both sides. His flashlight beam cut through darkness that seemed to swallow light, revealing only 10 feet ahead at a time. Atlas ran just ahead, nose low, pulling them forward with the certainty of a dog who trusted his senses more than sight. Marcus's lungs burned. His injured leg screamed with each impact, the old wound flaring hot and sharp. But he didn't slow. Behind them, the men in the mansion would realize soon enough that the tunnel existed. Would follow. Would hunt. The passage began to slope upward, gradually at first, then more steeply. The air grew fresher, damper, carrying the smell of rain and earth. Atlas's pace quickened, tail rigid with purpose. Then the dog stopped, so suddenly Marcus nearly crashed into him. Atlas stood perfectly still, head cocked, ears forward. Listening, Marcus killed his flashlight and held his breath. In the darkness, he heard it. Voices. Ahead of them. Muffled by distance, but unmistakable. Someone waited at the other end of the tunnel. His heart hammered against his ribs. Trapped between pursuers behind and unknown threats ahead. He'd survived worse odds in Afghanistan, but barely, and those battles had left him with injuries that would never fully heal. Atlas made a soft sound, not a growl, something else. Recognition? Confusion? The dog's tail lowered slightly, and he pressed against Marcus's leg, the gesture he made when uncertain. Marcus knelt beside him, hand on Atlas's back, thinking. The tunnel had to exit somewhere on the property, probably beyond the mansion's walls, hidden by decades of growth. Marilyn would have needed an escape route that opened far enough away to avoid immediate detection. The voices ahead grew louder. Not aggressive, not searching. Conversation. Casual, even. Marcus made a decision. He couldn't go back. Could only go forward. If whoever waited ahead was hostile, he'd face that when he reached them. At least it wasn't a sealed tomb. He turned his flashlight on, announcing his presence, and moved forward with Atlas tight against his side. The tunnel opened abruptly into a storm drain, concrete-lined and tall enough to stand in. Rain poured through grates above, creating waterfalls that echoed in the confined space. And standing 10 feet away, flashlights pointed at Marcus, were two people. A woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back, wearing an expensive raincoat. And beside her, a younger man, maybe 30, holding not a weapon but a camera. The woman's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you actually found it." Marcus raised his hand slowly, Atlas growling low beside him. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, ignoring Atlas's warning. "Marcus Reid? I'm Diana Sutherland. I'm the one who arranged the sale." Marcus's mind spun. "You're not the real estate lawyer." "No." Diana's expression was complex, layered with decades of something Marcus couldn't name. "I'm Marilyn Monroe's daughter." The words hung in the damp air, impossible and yet somehow fitting. Marcus stared at her, seeing it now. The bone structure, the eyes, something in the way she held herself that echoed photographs he'd seen of the famous actress. "That's not possible," Marcus said. "Marilyn never had children. Every biography lies." Diana's voice carried bitterness earned over a lifetime. "My mother gave birth to me in 1956. Secret pregnancy, secret birth, secret life. The studio couldn't allow America's sex symbol to be a mother. Bad for the image." The young man with the camera spoke for the first time. "I'm Ben Sutherland, her grandson. We've been watching this property for 30 years, waiting for someone to buy it. Someone the studio wouldn't suspect." Marcus lowered his hand slowly. Atlas stopped growling but remained alert, positioned between Marcus and the strangers. "The chamber," Diana said, eyes bright with something fierce. "You found it. The door was sealed for 60 years. We didn't have the code. But when the sensor alert went off tonight, we knew someone had opened it." "You set me up," Marcus said, anger rising. "You sold me the mansion knowing what was down there." "We sold you the mansion because we needed someone who would find it." Diana stepped closer, rain dripping from the grate above, creating a curtain between them. Someone with nothing to lose. Someone they wouldn't see coming. "Who's they?" Diana's expression hardened. "The same men who killed my mother. Or their sons. Their protégés. The legacy of power that's been protecting itself since 1962. Marcus thought of the voices above, the men searching the mansion, the footsteps coming to seal him inside. "They're up there now. They know I opened the chamber." "I know." Diana pulled out her phone. "Which means we have maybe 20 minutes before they seal this drain too. Ben, start filming." The young man raised his camera, pointing it at Marcus. A red light blinked on. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded. "Documenting," Diana said. "My mother spent her life being documented, filmed, photographed, recorded. She learned to use it, to make sure the truth couldn't be erased. We're going to do the same." Atlas whined softly, sensing the urgency in the air. Marcus looked at the dog, then at Diana, then at the camera pointed at his face. He thought of the journal in the chamber. Marilyn's final words. Her desperate hope that someone would find her evidence and make the powerful answer for their crimes. "Start from the beginning," Diana said. "Tell us everything you saw down there." And Marcus, standing in a storm drain beneath Brentwood with a woman who claimed impossible things and a dog who'd followed him through every hell, made a choice. The same choice he'd made in Afghanistan when mortar rounds fell and brothers needed carrying. The choice to move forward even when retreat seemed smarter. He started talking. He described the chamber. The gold bars stamped with Marilyn's name. The filing cabinets full of evidence. The journal recording every betrayal, every threat, every crime. He spoke steadily, methodically, the way he'd learned to give mission reports, while Ben's camera captured every word and Diana listened with tears streaming silently down her face. When Marcus finished, Diana wiped her eyes roughly. The gold alone is worth $240 million. But the documents? The evidence? That's priceless. It proves everything my mother tried to expose before they silenced her. What exactly did she try to expose? Marcus asked. Diana exchanged a look with Ben, then turned back to Marcus. My mother was having affairs with powerful men. Everyone knows that. The president, the attorney general, studio executives. But what they don't know is that she recorded everything. Audio recordings, financial records, details of operations that were supposed to stay classified forever. She was going to go public, write a memoir, expose the corruption, the manipulation, the blackmail that made Hollywood and Washington run. So they killed her, Marcus said quietly. They made it look like suicide, overdose, depression, the tragic end to a troubled woman. Diana's voice shook. But my mother was murdered because she knew too much and refused to stay quiet. Atlas suddenly stiffened, head swiveling toward the tunnel behind them. A low growl built in his chest. Someone's coming, Marcus said. Diana grabbed his arm. The evidence. Did you take anything? Marcus shook his head. I barely had time to look before. You have to go back. Are you insane? They're searching the house. They'll be in that tunnel any minute. Then we don't have time to argue. Diana pulled a small envelope from her coat. These are the real property deeds. Legal documents proving you own that mansion and everything in it, including what's underground. As long as you're the legal owner, they can't touch it without bringing questions they don't want asked. Marcus took the envelope, hands shaking slightly. This is insane. This is justice, Diana corrected. My mother died protecting those secrets. Now they're yours to protect or expose. Your choice. Ben lowered the camera. We'll create a distraction. Draw them out of the house. Give you a chance to get back to the chamber. And then what? Marcus demanded. I'm trapped in a mansion with no power, no food, no way to defend myself against men who've killed to keep this quiet. Diana met his eyes steadily. Then you do what my mother did. You survive. You document everything. You make sure the truth gets out even if you don't. Atlas barked sharply, the sound echoing off concrete walls. In the tunnel behind them, flashlights flickered in the darkness. The men from the mansion had found the passage. Go, Diana urged. Now. Marcus hesitated 1 second longer, looking at this woman who claimed to be Marilyn Monroe's secret daughter. This woman who'd orchestrated his purchase of a mansion hiding secrets worth killing for. This woman asking him to become the guardian of evidence that could destroy powerful legacies. Then he thought of the journal. Marilyn's final plea. Someone brave enough to make them answer. He ran. Atlas shot ahead, leading them back through the tunnel the way they'd come. Behind them, shouts erupted as the men spotted Diana and Ben. Voices demanding they stop, explain, cooperate. Diana's voice rose in response, clear and commanding, drawing attention away from Marcus's retreat. The tunnel seemed longer going back. Darker. The walls pressed closer, the air thicker. Marcus's leg burned with each step, old pain mixing with new exhaustion. But he pushed through it the way he'd pushed through everything since the blast that should have killed him. They reached the small door leading back to the chamber. Marcus pulled it open and slipped inside, Atlas right behind him. The chamber looked exactly as he'd left it, gold gleaming in neat rows, filing cabinets standing guard over decades of secrets, the journal still resting on the desk. Marcus moved quickly to the filing cabinets and started pulling files. He needed evidence small enough to carry, important enough to matter. He grabbed contracts showing payoffs to silence Marilyn. Photographs of her with men who swore they barely knew her. Audio recording labels promising conversations that ended careers. Atlas whined urgently. The dog stood at the steel door leading to the shaft, ears flat against his skull. Someone was coming down. Marcus shoved files into his jacket, grabbed the journal, then made a decision that would have seemed crazy if the last hour hadn't already shattered every definition of sanity. He pulled out his phone. Still no signal, but the camera worked. He started photographing everything. The gold bars with their stamps, the filing cabinet labels, pages from the journal, every piece of evidence he could capture in the seconds remaining. The flash lit up the chamber in strobing bursts, creating a strange stop-motion record of secrets that had waited 60 years to be seen. Voices echoed down the shaft. "He's down there. The door's still open." Atlas barked once, sharp and clear, his combat alert. The sound that meant contact imminent. Marcus kept photographing, hands moving on autopilot, the same focused calm that had descended in firefights. Time compressed. The world narrowed to flash, click, flash, click, evidence captured in digital ones and zeros that could live forever. Footsteps rang on metal. Someone climbing down. Marcus grabbed one gold bar, heavy as sin and twice as valuable, and shoved it in his pack. Physical proof. Undeniable evidence. Then he moved to the small door, Atlas already disappearing into the tunnel beyond. "Stop." Federal agents. Marcus ducked through the doorway and slammed it behind him. No lock on this side. He shoved a metal shelf against it, knowing it would by seconds at most, and ran. The tunnel ahead looked different now. His flashlight revealed markings he hadn't noticed before. Numbers spray-painted on the walls at intervals. Arrows pointing directions. Marilyn had marked her escape route carefully, preparing for a moment she must have known was coming. Atlas followed the arrows without hesitation, trusting the dead woman's paranoia to lead them to safety. Behind them, the door crashed open. Shouts. Pursuit. Flashlight beams cutting through darkness. Marcus ran harder than he'd run since physical therapy, pain screaming through his shattered leg, lungs burning, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. He carried evidence worth dying for and a dog worth living for, and somewhere ahead lay either capture or freedom, and he'd survived too much to surrender now. The tunnel branched suddenly. Atlas veered left without pausing. Marcus followed, trusting the dog's instincts, and immediately saw why. The right branch ended 20 feet ahead in a collapse, concrete and earth blocking the passage completely. A dead end. A trap for anyone pursuing without knowing the way. Their pursuers' voices faded slightly, confused by the choice, arguing about which direction. Marcus gained precious seconds. The tunnel began sloping upward again, steeper than before. Water trickled down the walls, and fresh air grew stronger. They were approaching another exit. Atlas's tail lifted slightly, his pace quickening. Then the passage opened into a different kind of space. Not a storm drain this time. A basement. Dusty. Old. But clearly maintained. Boxes stacked neatly. A workbench against one wall. Tools hung in organized rows. And in the corner, a staircase leading up. Atlas took the stairs 3 at a time. Marcus followed, each step sending jolts of agony through his leg, but the pain meant he was still moving, still alive, still fighting. The stairs ended at a door. Unlocked. Atlas pushed through with his shoulder and Marcus burst out behind him into rain and darkness, and the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. They were in someone's garage. Empty. Clean. Modern. A side door stood open to the night, rain pouring down beyond it. Marcus didn't question the gift. He ran through the rain toward the street, Atlas splashing through puddles beside him, both of them soaked within seconds, but free, outside, alive. His truck sat where he'd left it on the street outside the mansion, key still in his pocket. He unlocked it, and Atlas jumped in, shaking water everywhere. Marcus slid behind the wheel, hands trembling so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. He pulled away from the curb just as headlights appeared behind him. The pursuers, emerging from wherever that tunnel had led them, realizing their quarry had escaped. But Marcus knew these streets now. He'd driven them for hours before finding the mansion, memorizing routes, exits, escape paths the way he'd memorized every road outside their base in Afghanistan. Old habits, hard habits, survival habits. He took 3 quick turns, doubling back, cutting through alleys, until the headlights disappeared. Then he drove steadily, carefully, like a man with nothing to hide, toward the highway leading out of Brentwood. Atlas sat in the passenger seat, panting heavily, watching the road with those steady dark eyes. Marcus reached over and scratched behind the dog's ear. Good boy. Best dog in the world. Atlas leaned into his hand, tail wagging twice. Mission accomplished. Marcus drove in silence for 10 minutes before his hands stopped shaking enough to pull over. He sat in a dark parking lot, rain drumming on the truck's roof, and pulled out his phone. The photos were there. Dozens of them. Clear. Damning. Undeniable. Evidence of crimes committed by men who thought they'd buried their secrets deep enough that time would erase them. He opened the files he'd grabbed from the chamber. Contracts signed by studio executives. Letters written by politicians. Financial records showing payments made to ensure Marilyn Monroe's silence. Then her death. Then the decades of covering up what they'd done. And the journal. Marilyn's handwriting, elegant and desperate. Her final testimony. Her last stand against the machine that had used her and discarded her and expected her to fade quietly into history. Marcus looked at Atlas. The dog gazed back at him with complete trust. The kind of trust that came from walking through fire together and refusing to let go. We're in so much trouble, boy. Atlas's tail wagged once. Marcus laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd laughed? When was the last time he'd felt anything except exhaustion and pain and the weight of memories he couldn't outrun? But sitting in this truck with stolen evidence and a loyal dog and the rain washing away the last hour's terror, Marcus felt something else. Purpose. The thing that had been missing since he came home. The reason to wake up that had vanished with his brothers in that blast. He thought of Diana's words. Your choice to protect or expose. He thought of Marilyn's final entry. Someone brave enough to make them answer. He thought of all the veterans he'd known who came home broken and alone and forgotten, who survived wars only to lose battles against silence and isolation and the world's indifference. And he made his choice. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove through the rain toward the one place he knew would still be open at 2 a.m. The 24-hour copy shop near the VA hospital where he'd spent 3 months learning to walk again. Inside, ignoring the night clerk's stare at his soaked clothes and limping gait, Marcus printed every photograph, every document, made copies, burned them to USB drives, created redundancy upon redundancy, making sure the truth couldn't be erased. Atlas waited in the truck, dry and warm with the heater running, watching his human through the shop window with patient devotion. When Marcus emerged 2 hours later, he carried 6 flash drives, 3 folders of prints, and a plan forming in his mind. He drove to the post office at dawn and mailed packages to addresses Diana had included in the envelope. Journalists, lawyers, historians, the Library of Congress, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Seeds of truth scattered too widely to suppress. Then he drove back to Brentwood as the sun rose over the city, painting the rain-washed streets gold and pink and beautiful. He parked outside the mansion's gate and sat there, watching early morning light touch the crumbling walls. Atlas whined softly, sensing Marcus's intention. I know, Marcus murmured. But we can't run. Not anymore. Because the evidence was out there now, copied and mailed, and beyond the reach of men who'd killed to protect it. But the mansion itself, the chamber beneath it, the physical proof that couldn't be disputed, that still needed protecting until the truth came fully into light. And Marcus had learned in Afghanistan that some positions were worth holding even when retreat seemed smarter. That sometimes a man made his stand not because he was sure he'd win, but because the alternative was living with having run. He got out of the truck. Atlas jumped down beside him. Together they walked through the rusted gate, up the overgrown path, and through the front door of a mansion that had already claimed too many lives. But this time they weren't running. This time they were staying. And this time, when the powerful men came to reclaim their secrets, they'd find a veteran who'd survived worse than them, and a dog who'd follow his human straight to hell, if necessary. The first rays of morning sun slipped through broken windows, illuminating dust motes floating like golden snow. Marcus stood in the entry hall and looked around at the decay and forgotten grandeur, seeing it differently now. Not as a last resort, but as a mission, a position to defend. Atlas sat beside him, ears forward, tail still, ready for whatever came next. Marcus pulled out his phone and made one more call. The number Diana had given him. It rang once before she answered. You went back, she said. I got the evidence out. Mailed it to everyone you listed. Thank God. Her relief was palpable. Now get out of there. They'll come back. I'm staying. Silence on the line. Then, softly, you don't have to do this. Yes. Marcus said, looking around the house that had sheltered Marilyn Monroe's final secrets. I do. Because some debts transcended time. Some promises were made to strangers who felt like family. And some battles chose you, whether you wanted them or not. Marcus ended the call and pocketed his phone. Atlas looked up at him with absolute trust, waiting for orders. Let's secure the perimeter, boy, Marcus said, using the same words he'd used every night on deployment. Then we dig in. And as morning light filled the abandoned mansion, a homeless veteran and his loyal dog began transforming it from a tomb of secrets into a fortress of truth. Room by room, board by board, memory by memory. Marilyn Monroe had built this place to protect herself from the powerful. Now it would protect her legacy. And the broken soldier who'd found it would make sure her final wish came true. Someone had been brave enough. Someone had made them answer. And the answering had only just begun. The next 3 days passed in a blur of exhaustion and purpose. Marcus worked from dawn until after dark, transforming the mansion from abandoned ruin into something defensible. He boarded broken windows, reinforced doors, cleared sight lines. Atlas stayed close, sometimes helping by dragging boards, sometimes just watching with that steady presence that kept Marcus grounded when old memories threatened to surface. At night, Marcus slept light and restless in Marilyn's preserved bedroom, the one room untouched by decay. Atlas curled beside him, ears twitching at every sound. The dog woke Marcus twice when cars drove slowly past the property, headlights sweeping across the walls like searchlights probing for weakness. But no one tried the gates. No one approached the door. They were waiting, watching, planning. Marcus used the time to go through the documents he'd kept. The more he read, the clearer the picture became. Marilyn hadn't just collected evidence of affairs and broken promises. She'd documented systematic abuse by men who wielded power like weapons. Studio executives who forced actresses into degrading situations. Politicians who used their positions to exploit vulnerable women. A network of protection that ensured powerful men faced no consequences while their victims were silenced, discredited, or destroyed. And the gold. Marcus learned from Marilyn's journal that she'd been paid enormous sums to keep quiet. Hush money that was supposed to buy her complicity. Instead, she'd converted it to gold bars, stamped each one with her name, and hidden them beneath her bedroom floor. A fortune built on silence she refused to maintain. A treasure that testified to crimes men wanted forgotten. On the 4th morning, Diana called. The packages arrived, she said without preamble. Journalists are starting to ask questions. The Academy is convening an emergency board meeting. The pressure is building. Good. Marcus, they're going to come for you. These aren't men who accept exposure quietly. Let them come. You're one veteran with a dog against an organization that's protected itself for 60 years. Marcus looked at Atlas, who sat alert by the window, watching the street with unwavering focus. I've had worse odds. Diana was quiet for a moment. There's something you should know. My mother had allies. People who tried to help her, who were forced into silence when she died. Some of them are still alive, still waiting for a chance to testify. Can they get here? I'm making calls. But Marcus, even with witnesses, even with evidence, you're sitting in the epicenter of everything they want to destroy. That mansion needs to survive long enough for the truth to spread beyond their reach. It will. How can you be so sure? Marcus thought of the men he'd served with. The ones who died holding positions against overwhelming odds because retreating meant letting darkness win. He thought of the choice they'd made, the same choice he was making now. Because some things are worth defending, he said quietly. After the call ended, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't just wait for attack. He needed to tell the story himself. Make sure his version was recorded before anyone could silence him. He set up his phone in the preserved bedroom, positioned himself in front of Marilyn's wall of evidence, and started recording. My name is Marcus Reid. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. 4 days ago, I bought this mansion for $100. What I found here is evidence of crimes committed against Marilyn Monroe and covered up for 6 decades. He spoke steadily for 20 minutes, showing the documents, explaining the chamber, reading entries from Marilyn's journal. Atlas sat beside him throughout, occasionally glancing at the camera as if understanding they were creating testimony that needed to survive. When Marcus finished, he uploaded the video to every platform he could access: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, sent it to news stations, posted it in veteran forums, and true crime groups made it impossible to suppress. Within an hour, the video had 10,000 views. Within 3 hours, 50,000. By evening, news vans were pulling up outside the mansion's gate. Atlas barked sharply, alerting Marcus to movement. He looked out to see reporters setting up cameras, adjusting lights, preparing to broadcast live from the street. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Reid, this is Emily Chun from the Los Angeles Times. We'd like to interview you about. Come to the gate, Marcus said. I'll answer questions there. He walked outside with Atlas beside him, limping down the overgrown path to face a wall of cameras and reporters. Microphones thrust toward him. Questions overlapped until he raised a hand. I'll tell you everything, he said. But you need to understand what this place is. This mansion holds evidence of crimes committed by powerful men against Marilyn Monroe. She died protecting these secrets. I'm here to make sure her death meant something. The questions came rapid fire then. What evidence? Who was involved? How did he find it? Was he in danger? Marcus answered each one carefully, methodically, while cameras recorded and broadcast his words to thousands, then hundreds of thousands of viewers. He showed copies of documents. Read passages from Marilyn's journal. Explained the chamber, the gold, the systematic abuse and cover-up. Behind the reporters, more cars arrived. Not news vans. Black SUVs with tinted windows. Men in suits emerged, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching with expressions Marcus recognized. Not quite threatening. Not quite legal authority. Something in between that he'd seen in Afghanistan when private military contractors operated in spaces the regular military couldn't touch. Atlas growled low. The dog had seen them too. Marcus wrapped up the interview. The evidence speaks for itself. Marilyn Monroe was murdered to protect powerful men's reputations. That ends today. He turned and walked back toward the mansion, Atlas close against his leg. Behind them, reporters shouted follow-up questions. Cameras kept rolling, and the men in suits made calls, their expressions hardening. Inside the mansion, Marcus locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. His leg throbbed viciously where old shrapnel ground against bone. His hands shook with adrenaline crash. But he'd done it. Spoken truth in front of cameras that made it too public to bury. Atlas whined softly, pressing his head under Marcus's hand. The dog sensed the crash coming, the moment when adrenaline faded and pain rushed in to fill the void. Marcus slid down to sit on the floor, back against the door. Atlas lay beside him, warm and solid, an anchor against the tide threatening to pull him under. We did good, boy, Marcus whispered. Whatever happens now, we did good. His phone buzzed constantly. Messages. Calls. The video had gone viral. Millions of views. Trending worldwide. Hashtag Justice for Marilyn. Hashtag Hollywood Secrets. Hashtag Marine Guards Truth. But among the messages was one that made his blood run cold. Unknown number. For words. You should have run. Marcus showed it to Atlas. The dog's hackles rose immediately, responding to the threat his humans sensed. They came at midnight. Marcus had prepared as best he could. He'd blocked the front and back doors with furniture heavy enough to slow entry. He'd positioned himself in Marilyn's bedroom with clear sight lines to the stairs. He'd gathered weapons. Not guns. He didn't own any anymore. Too many memories attached. But tools that could defend. Hammers. Wrenches. A shovel with a blade he'd sharpened against stone. Atlas lay near the door, positioned to intercept anyone who made it up the stairs. The dog had switched fully into combat mode, the transformation Marcus had seen in Afghanistan. No more pet. Pure military working dog, trained to protect, trained to attack, trained to give his life for his handler if necessary. The first sound was glass breaking downstairs. Multiple windows simultaneously. Professional. Coordinated. They were coming in from several directions at once. Atlas's ears flattened against his skull. A continuous low growl rumbled from his chest. Marcus gripped the shovel, feeling his heartbeat slow, his breathing steady, his mind shifting into the cold clarity that had kept him alive through firefights. Fear receded. Purpose remained. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Multiple people. They weren't trying to hide anymore. A voice called up, cultured, educated, accustomed to obedience. Mr. Reid, we just want to talk. Marcus didn't answer. In his experience, people who just wanted to talk didn't break into houses at midnight. You've created quite a spectacle. Very impressive. But you don't understand what you're interfering with. This isn't about Marilyn Monroe. This is about structures that maintain order, stability, without which, chaos. Atlas snarled loudly. The sound echoed through the mansion like a promise of violence. The voice continued, unperturbed. We're prepared to offer you compensation. Substantial compensation. Enough to live very comfortably. All we need is for you to publicly recant. Say you were mistaken about the evidence. That your PTSD caused you to see conspiracies where none existed. We'll even help you. Get you treatment. Support. Marcus felt cold rage wash through him. They were trying to use his diagnosis as a weapon. Paint him as unstable. Unreliable. They'd done the same to Marilyn. Called her crazy, unstable, oversensitive. Anything to discredit her truth. No deal. Marcus called back. Silence. Then, that's unfortunate. 3 men appeared at the top of the stairs. Not the voice. These were hired muscle. Big. Professional. Moving with the precision of former military or police. Atlas exploded toward them with a snarl that raised every hair on Marcus's arms. The dog hit the first man like a missile, 80 pounds of trained aggression, taking him down before he could react. They crashed into the wall with a sound like thunder. The second man raised something. Taser. Marcus threw the shovel. It spun through the air and struck the man's shoulder, knocking his aim off. The taser fired, prongs embedding in the wall instead of flesh. The third man came straight at Marcus. Big mistake. Marcus had learned hand-to-hand combat from Marine instructors who emphasized surviving against larger opponents. He sidestepped, used the man's momentum against him, sent him stumbling past into the bedroom. Atlas had the first man pinned, jaws locked on his arm, growling with primal fury. The man screamed, trying to shake the dog off. The second man reached for something at his belt. Gun. Marcus grabbed a lamp from the hallway table and swung it with everything he had. The base connected with the man's temple. He dropped hard, unconscious before he hit the floor. The third man recovered, turned, and faced Marcus with new calculation. This one was smarter. Patient. He feinted left, then came right, faster than Marcus expected. His fist caught Marcus in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Marcus's injured leg buckled. He went down hard, vision swimming. The man stood over him, reaching for his throat. Then Atlas was there, releasing the first man and launching at this new threat. The dog's jaws closed on the man's wrist. Bone cracked. The man screamed. Marcus rolled away, gasping, and grabbed the wrench he'd positioned against the wall. When the man yanked his arm free from Atlas's grip, Marcus swung upward, catching him under the chin. The man's head snapped back. He collapsed. For a moment, the only sound was Atlas's panting and Marcus's ragged breathing. 3 men down. More might be coming. Marcus forced himself to stand. His ribs screamed. His leg felt like it was being torn apart from the inside. But he was upright, still fighting. Atlas pressed against him, blood on his muzzle but eyes bright, alert, ready for more. Then sirens. Multiple sirens approaching fast. The mansion lit up with red and blue lights flashing through windows. The cultured voice called up again. You've made your point, Mr. Reid. Enjoy your victory. It won't last. Footsteps retreated. Doors slammed. Engine started. By the time Marcus made it to the window, the SUVs were disappearing down the street, leaving the scene before police arrived. But they'd left their hired muscle behind. The 3 men lay groaning on the floor, one cradling a broken wrist, another holding his bleeding arm, the third barely conscious from the blow to his head. Police pounded on the door. LAPD. Open up. Marcus limped downstairs, Atlas beside him, and opened the door to face a dozen officers with weapons drawn. Hands up. Get on the ground. Marcus raised his hands. My name is Marcus Reid. This is my property. Those men broke in and attacked me. My dog and I defended ourselves. The officers swarmed in, securing the scene, calling for paramedics. One officer, older, weathered, studied Marcus with eyes that had seen too much. He looked at the defensive injuries on Marcus's arms, the blood on Atlas's muzzle, the broken furniture and shattered glass. You're the Marine who bought the mansion, the officer said. Yes, sir. The one who found evidence about Marilyn Monroe. Yes, sir. The officer looked around the mansion, seeing what Marcus saw. A position defended against overwhelming odds. A last stand that somehow hadn't become a last breath. Hell of a fight, the officer said quietly. Not the first time, sir. The officer's expression softened with recognition. Brother to brother. one veteran to another. Probably won't be the last either. Marcus managed a tired smile. No, sir. Probably not. The night dissolved into statements and photographs and paramedics checking injuries. Atlas sat possessively beside Marcus throughout, refusing to let anyone separate them. The dog had saved his life. Again, the way he'd saved it in Afghanistan. The way he'd saved it in every moment since when Marcus's mind tried to drag him under. By dawn, the mansion was a crime scene. Yellow tape, evidence markers, detectives taking samples. But Marcus's story held up. Security footage from a neighbor's camera had caught the SUVs arriving, men in tactical gear breaking windows. Clear evidence of home invasion. The three hired muscle refused to talk. Lawyered up immediately. But their silence told its own story. They'd been sent by someone with resources, someone who could afford the best legal defense, someone who thought they could make this problem disappear. But the problem was viral now. Millions knew about the mansion, the evidence, the secrets buried 60 years. Every news outlet covered the break-in. Former Hollywood insiders started coming forward with their own stories of abuse and cover-ups. Diana appeared on morning shows, confirming her identity as Marilyn's daughter, providing genetic proof, sharing her mother's hidden history. The dam was breaking. The truth was flooding through cracks that could no longer be sealed. Marcus sat on the mansion's front steps 3 days after the attack, watching news vans pack up and leave. The story had moved on to congressional hearings, studio investigations, criminal inquiries. His part was mostly done. He'd opened the chamber, released the evidence, defended the position long enough for truth to spread beyond anyone's ability to contain it. Atlas lay beside him, bandaged but healing, basking in morning sun. The dog's tail thumped occasionally against the step, contentment radiating from him. Diana walked up the path, accompanied by her grandson Ben. They sat beside Marcus without asking permission. "How are you?" Diana asked. "Tired." "I can imagine." She looked at the mansion, expression complex. "My mother would have liked you. She always trusted dogs more than people." Marcus scratched behind Atlas's ear. "Smart woman. The studio is offering to buy the mansion back. Full price. $20 million. Marcus looked at her sharply. To bury the evidence. To control the narrative. Diana's smile was bitter. "They're very good at that. Been doing it for 70 years. What did you tell them?" "I told them it's not my decision. It's yours. You own it." Marcus looked at the crumbling mansion. This place built to showcase Hollywood glamour that became a prison for a woman trying to survive. This place that had secrets worth killing for and evidence worth dying to protect. This place that had given him purpose when he'd thought purpose was dead. "I have a different idea," Marcus said slowly. Diana waited. "Your mother built this place with money she earned being used by powerful men. She hid gold bought with hush money she refused to let silence her. And when she died, all of it stayed buried because no one thought her truth mattered enough to fight for." Marcus stood, legs screaming but holding his weight. Atlas rose beside him. "This mansion shouldn't be sold to people who want to erase what happened here. It should be preserved. A museum. A memorial. A place that tells the truth about what happened to Marilyn Monroe and every other person crushed by systems designed to protect the powerful." Diana's eyes filled with tears. She'd want that. God, she'd want exactly that. "And the gold," Marcus continued. $250 million? That becomes an endowment. For survivors. For victims of abuse in Hollywood. For veterans dealing with PTSD. For anyone who needs help fighting systems that try to silence them. Ben, who'd been filming everything quietly, lowered his camera with an expression of awe. "That's what his mother tried to do when she was alive," Diana finished softly. "Use her platform to help people. Speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves." Marcus looked at Atlas. The dog gazed back at him with absolute trust. With love earned through shared trauma and survival. With the bond that made every fight worthwhile. "I didn't come to Los Angeles looking for a cause," Marcus said. "I came looking for a place to disappear." But Atlas found something else. Something that needed protecting. Someone whose voice was stolen and needed returning. He turned to Diana. "So no, the studio can't have this place. This place belongs to the truth. And the truth belongs to everyone." Diana wiped her eyes and smiled. A real smile. Her mother's smile. "Then let's make sure the world never forgets." Over the following months, the transformation began. The mansion was stabilized, preserved, converted into the Marilyn Monroe Truth and Advocacy Center. The chamber beneath became an exhibition space where visitors could see the evidence she'd hidden, the journal she'd written, the gold she'd marked with her name as testimony to the price of silence. Marcus stayed throughout the renovation, living in a small apartment added to the property, overseeing every detail. He'd found his mission, the thing that gave his days meaning beyond surviving the next nightmare, managing the next panic attack, enduring the next reminder of brothers left behind in Afghan dust. Atlas became the unofficial mascot of the center. Visitors loved the story of the veteran and his loyal dog who'd uncovered Hollywood's darkest secret. Children petted the gentle giant who transformed into a warrior when his human needed protecting. Other veterans came to see Marcus, to talk to someone who understood, to meet the dog who proved that surviving was just the first step toward finding purpose again. Diana visited regularly, finally able to speak openly about her mother, to share memories that had been kept secret for 6 decades. She brought other children of old Hollywood, people with their own hidden stories, their own evidence of abuse and cover-up and systematic protection of predators. The truth kept expanding. More victims came forward. More evidence surfaced. Studios that had hidden behind money and lawyers and time found themselves facing consequences. Not all the perpetrators faced justice. Some were dead. Some were too powerful still. But the silence was broken. The conspiracy of protection shattered. And it had started with a homeless veteran spending his last $100 on an abandoned mansion because he had nowhere else to go, and a loyal dog who refused to let darkness stay buried. 1 year after Marcus bought the mansion, the center held its grand opening. Hundreds attended. Survivors, advocates, journalists, veterans, people drawn by the story of second chances and unlikely heroes and truth that refused to stay dead. Marcus stood at the entrance with Atlas beside him, watching people stream through doors that had been sealed so long. Diana spoke at the podium, telling her mother's story, finally claiming her heritage publicly. Ben played the video he'd filmed that first night in the storm drain. Marcus's initial testimony, raw and real and impossible to deny. After the ceremony, as crowds dispersed and evening fell soft over Brentwood, Marcus sat on the front steps again. His spot, his position. Atlas lay beside him, gray starting to show around the dog's muzzle. Age creeping in, but spirit still fierce. A young woman approached hesitantly. Early 20s. Nervous hands. Haunted eyes Marcus recognized from his own mirror. "Mr. Reid? I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you. What you did here, what you exposed, it helped me. I was working as an assistant at a studio, and..." She faltered, tears starting. Marcus gestured to the step beside him. She sat. "You don't have to tell me," Marcus said gently. "But if you need someone to listen, I'm here." Atlas rested his head on her lap, offering wordless comfort. She stroked his fur, and the tears came harder, but healing tears, releasing tears, tears that came when someone finally felt safe enough to break. She talked for 20 minutes. Marcus listened the way Atlas had taught him, with patience and presence and the absolute certainty that surviving was enough, that speaking truth was courage, that no one fought these battles alone. When she finished, Marcus gave her the Sinner's Advocate number, connected her with resources, reminded her that coming forward was the first step toward reclaiming the power that had been taken. She left stronger than she'd arrived. Not healed. Healing took longer than 20 minutes. But seen, believed, supported. Atlas watched her go, then looked up at Marcus with an expression that might have been pride. "Yeah, boy," Marcus murmured. "We're doing okay." As darkness fell and lights came on throughout the center, Marcus thought about the journey that had led here. The blast in Afghanistan. The hospital. The divorce. The truck. The desperate search for anywhere to belong. The $100 gamble on a mansion that should have been his ending but became his purpose. He thought about Marilyn Monroe, brilliant and broken and brave, who'd built this place as a fortress and filled it with evidence and hoped that someday someone would care enough to fight for her truth. He thought about all the people who'd suffered in silence because systems protected the powerful and punished the vulnerable. All the voices stolen by money and lawyers and time. And he thought about Atlas, loyal Atlas, who'd found the hidden panel beneath a bed and refused to let it stay sealed. Who'd led Marcus into danger and defended him through it. Who'd proven that sometimes the smallest act of digging, The most stubborn refusal to ignore what others wanted buried could change everything. The mansion glowed behind them, lights in every window, life restored to spaces that had been dead. Voices drifted out, conversations, laughter, the sound of people gathering for purposes that mattered. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the recording app. Time to update the center's social media. Share progress. Keep the story alive. Atlas positioned himself in frame automatically, knowing the routine now. Marcus hit record. Day 365 at the Marilyn Monroe Truth and Advocacy Center. We opened today. Hundreds of visitors. Story shared. Truth told. Next week we're launching the Survivor Support Program funded by the gold we found. If you're struggling, if you need help, if you have a story that's been silenced, we're here. You're not alone. He paused, scratching behind Atlas's ear. 1 year ago, I bought this mansion for $100. I was homeless, broke, thought my life was over. But Atlas found something I couldn't see. Hope, purpose, proof that even the darkest secrets can't survive the light. Atlas leaned into the camera, tongue lolling, tail wagging. Whatever you're facing, whatever secrets you're carrying, whatever battles you're fighting, keep going. Keep digging. Keep refusing to let darkness win. Because you never know what you'll find when you're brave enough to look beneath the surface. He ended the recording and uploaded it. Within minutes, comments poured in. Survivors sharing their stories. Veterans checking in. People around the world finding courage in the tale of a broken soldier and his loyal dog who'd somehow changed everything. Marcus put his phone away and looked at Atlas. The dog gazed back at him with eyes that held absolute devotion, complete trust, unbreakable loyalty. Best $100 I ever spent, Marcus whispered. Atlas's tail thumped against the step. Agreement. Always agreement. They sat together as night deepened, guardian and guardian, survivor and survivor, watching over a mansion that had become a memorial, a museum, a movement. Watching over truth that had waited 60 years to be free. Somewhere in Hollywood, in boardrooms and studios and legal offices, powerful men worried. Calculated damage. Prepared defenses. Tried to control a narrative that had slipped beyond their reach. But on the steps of 12305, 5th Helena Drive, a veteran and his dog simply sat in the light, holding the line, refusing to let darkness reclaim what they'd fought to expose. Because some secrets should stay buried. But truth about injustice, abuse, and systematic protection of predators? That truth deserved to breathe, to shine, to inspire others to speak up, dig deeper, fight harder. And thanks to Marcus Reid, Atlas, and a woman who died trying to expose it all 60 years ago, that truth finally had its day. The mansion stood as proof. The evidence spoke for itself. The legacy endured. And somewhere beyond the headlines and investigations and ongoing fights, perhaps Marilyn Monroe finally rested, knowing someone had been brave enough to finish what she started. Someone had made them answer. Someone had refused to let her story end in silence. A homeless veteran with nothing left to lose. And a loyal dog who wouldn't let darkness stay buried. Together, they'd uncovered a $240 million secret. But the real treasure wasn't gold. It was justice, purpose, proof that one person with courage and a companion with loyalty could stand against systems designed to silence them. Could stand, could fight, could win. The night grew quiet. The center lights glowed warm. And Marcus Reid, Marine Corps veteran, finally felt something he'd thought was lost forever in Afghan dust. Peace. Not the absence of pain. Not the erasure of trauma. But the deep, bone-level certainty that his life meant something. That his battles served a purpose. That surviving had led him to exactly where he needed to be. Atlas sighed contentedly, head resting on Marcus's knee. And in the morning, they'd wake and do it again. Welcome, survivors. Tell truth. Stand guard over secrets that had waited 60 years for someone brave enough to bring them into light. One day at a time. One story at a time. One act of courage at a time. Because that's how you change the world. Not with grand gestures or perfect plans, but with stubborn refusal to let injustice win. With loyalty that refuses to quit. With truth that refuses to die. With one broken soldier and one faithful dog who proved that sometimes the smallest act of digging uncovers treasures that change everything. Forever. 6 months after the grand opening, Marcus stood in what had once been Marilyn's living room, now transformed into a conference space where survivors met weekly. Folding chairs arranged in a circle, coffee brewing in the corner. Soft lighting that felt safe, not institutional. Atlas lay near the door in his usual spot, monitoring everyone who entered with calm assessment. The support group had grown from 3 people that first awkward meeting to 23 regulars, with new faces appearing each week. Men and women who'd survived abuse in Hollywood, corporate America, anywhere power created opportunities for predators. Veterans dealing with trauma that wouldn't let go. People who'd spent years believing their stories didn't matter, discovering they weren't alone. Marcus didn't lead the sessions. A trained therapist did that. But he attended every one, sitting quietly in his chair with Atlas at his feet, offering the same steady presence his dog had given him through darkest nights. Tonight, a new face sat across from him. Young man, maybe 25, hands shaking slightly as he gripped a styrofoam cup. Military haircut growing out. Posture that screamed veteran even in civilian clothes. Eyes that had seen things they couldn't unsee. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Chun, guided the discussion with practiced gentleness. When the new veteran's turn came, he stared at the floor and said nothing for a long moment. Atlas lifted his head, watching the young man with focused attention. "I don't know how to talk about it," the veteran finally whispered. "That's okay," Dr. Chun said. "You don't have to share anything until you're ready." The young man's voice cracked. "I keep seeing their faces. My squad. The ones who didn't make it home. I was supposed to protect them." Marcus recognized the guilt. The survivor's burden. The weight of breathing when brothers couldn't. "They died and I lived, and I don't know why." The veteran continued, tears starting. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that." Atlas stood slowly and walked across the circle. He sat directly in front of the young veteran and placed his head on the man's knee. The gentle pressure, the offered comfort. The veteran's hand dropped automatically to Atlas's head, fingers tangling in fur. "I had a dog in my unit. She saved us so many times. Then the IED. He couldn't finish. She died protecting you," Marcus said quietly. First time he'd spoken all session. The young veteran looked up at him, recognition passing between them. Brother to brother. Survivor to survivor. "Yeah. And you think you don't deserve to be here because she's not," Marcus continued, voice steady but gentle. "You think surviving means you failed somehow. That if you'd been better, stronger, faster, they'd all still be here, and you'd be the one who didn't make it." The veteran nodded, tears streaming now. Marcus leaned forward. "Your dog didn't save you so you could spend the rest of your life hating yourself for breathing. She saved you because she loved you. Because that's what dogs do. They protect the humans they love, and they don't regret it, and they don't expect you to stop living because they're gone." Atlas remained perfectly still, head on the veteran's knee, offering wordless agreement. "She saved you so you could live," Marcus said. "Not just survive. Live. Find purpose. Help others. Prove that her sacrifice meant something." The young veteran sobbed, both hands buried in Atlas's fur now. Holding on like the dog was the only thing keeping him from drowning. The rest of the group sat in respectful silence, some crying quietly themselves, some nodding with recognition. All of them understanding the weight this young man carried because they carried their own versions. When the session ended an hour later, people lingered, talking softly, exchanging numbers, building the support networks that would sustain them between meetings. The young veteran stayed in his chair, still holding on to Atlas. Marcus approached slowly. "Coffee." The veteran looked up, eyes red but clearer. "Yeah, thanks." They walked to the small kitchen area Marcus had installed. Nothing fancy, just a coffee maker, some snacks, a quiet space where people could decompress after sharing trauma. Marcus poured 2 cups and handed one over. The veteran took it with hands that shook slightly less than when he'd arrived. "How long have you been out?" Marcus asked. 8 months. Honorable discharge after my 3rd tour. Came home to..." He gestured vaguely. "Nothing. My girlfriend left. Parents don't understand. Friends from before seem like strangers. I'm sleeping in my car most nights because shelters won't take my dog's ashes and I can't leave her in the car alone." Marcus felt the familiar ache of recognition. Different details, same story. The one too many veterans lived. "You have somewhere to stay tonight." The veteran shook his head. Marcus made a decision. "We've got a guest room. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. You and your dog's ashes are both welcome." The veteran's eyes widened. "I can't. I mean, you don't even know me." "I know enough." Marcus gestured toward the conference room where Atlas still sat, watching them. That dog saved my life more times than I can count. He led me to this place when I had nothing, helped me find purpose when I thought mine was gone. I figure I owe it to him to help other veterans when I can. I don't have money to pay you. Didn't ask for money. Asked if you wanted a bed for the night. The veteran's face crumpled. Why are you being so nice? Because 6 months ago, I was sleeping in my truck with my last $100, deciding whether to spend it on this mansion or save it for gas to drive somewhere else and give up. Someone gave me a chance. Figured I'd pass it along. The veteran nodded slowly. Just tonight. Or until you get on your feet. However long you need. Atlas padded into the kitchen and sat between them, looking from Marcus to the young veteran, as if assessing the situation and approving. The veteran knelt and scratched behind Atlas's ears. What's his name? Atlas. German Shepherd. 5 years old. Survived an IED that killed 3 of my brothers. Came home with me when the Corps medically retired us both. He's beautiful. The veteran's voice was thick with emotion. My dog was a Belgian Malinois. Harper. She could smell explosives from 100 yards away. Until the day she couldn't smell them in time. I'm sorry. Me too. The veteran stood, wiping his eyes roughly. I'm Derek, by the way. Derek Morrison. Marcus shook his hand. Marcus Reid. Welcome to the center, Derek. And welcome home. That night, Marcus showed Derek to the guest room. Small but clean, with a view of the garden they'd planted in Marilyn's old rose beds. Derek clutched a small wooden box that held Harper's ashes like it was the most precious thing in the world. Bathrooms down the hall, Marcus said. Kitchen's open anytime. Atlas usually sleeps in my room, but if you need him, just call. He's got a sixth sense for when people are struggling. Derek set the wooden box carefully on the nightstand and sat on the bed. Why are you doing this? Really? Marcus leaned against the doorframe. You asked me that already. I know. But there's got to be more to it than just paying forward a chance someone gave you. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. You know what the worst part of coming home was for me? Wasn't the physical injuries. Wasn't even the nightmares, though those were hell. It was feeling like I didn't matter anymore. Like I'd served my purpose and now I was just excess inventory. Something to be warehoused or discarded. Derek nodded slowly. Yeah, I know that feeling. This place changed that for me. Gave me purpose again. Made me feel like my life still meant something. Like surviving was the beginning of something, not just the end. Marcus gestured toward the window, toward the mansion beyond. Every person who comes through those doors looking for help, every story that gets told, every survivor who finds their voice. That's why. That's what makes waking up worth it. But you could do that anywhere. Why here? Why Marilyn Monroe's mansion? Marcus smiled slightly. You know what I learned going through her journals, reading her letters, understanding what she fought against? She and veterans have more in common than you'd think. Both used by systems that needed them. Both discarded when they became inconvenient. Both struggling to be seen as human instead of symbols. Both fighting battles nobody acknowledged while everyone judged them for not being perfect soldiers in wars they didn't choose. Derek's expression shifted, understanding dawning. She was fighting her own kind of war. Exactly. And she lost that war the way too many veterans lose theirs. Alone. Unheard. With everyone saying her pain was her fault. Her trauma was weakness. Her truth was lies. Marcus straightened. So, I stay here because this place represents what happens when we refuse to let that be the end of the story. When we dig up the truth, expose the systems that crush people, and build something better. You really believe that? That one place can make a difference. 6 months ago, I'd have said no. Now, Marcus looked toward his own room, where Atlas waited patiently. I've seen 23 people find hope in those support group meetings. Seen survivors of Hollywood abuse testify in court cases that are finally moving forward. Seen 3 studios fire executives who'd been protected for decades. Seen Congress pass legislation strengthening protections for whistleblowers. All because of what we found in a chamber beneath this house. He met Derek's eyes. One place can't fix everything, but it can start something. And sometimes starting something is enough. Derek nodded, exhaustion finally showing through the walls he'd built. Thank you. Really. For the bed. For listening. For all of it. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. Job placement, VA benefits, whatever you need. You're not alone in this anymore. Marcus left Derek there and returned to his own room. Atlas waited on the bed, tail thumping softly. What do you think, boy? Did we do the right thing? Atlas's tail thumped harder. Approval. Marcus changed for bed and lay down with Atlas curled against his side. Through the wall, he heard Derek moving around, settling in, and then quiet. The kind of quiet that came when someone finally felt safe enough to stop holding every muscle tense against threats that might never come. Marcus stared at the ceiling, thinking about the path that had led here. The $100 gamble. The hidden chamber. The evidence that changed everything. The fight to protect it. And now this. A veteran he'd just met sleeping in the guest room because Marcus remembered what it felt like to have nowhere to go and no one who cared. His phone buzzed. Text from Diana. Saw the news. Another studio executive resigned today. 14 victims came forward. Your center gave them courage to speak. Thank you for everything you're doing. Mom would be so proud. Marcus smiled and set the phone down. He thought about Marilyn, who died trying to expose the truth, who'd hidden evidence hoping someone would find it, who'd built escape routes and secret chambers and fought back the only ways available to her. She'd protected her truth well enough that it survived 60 years of powerful men trying to erase it. And when a homeless veteran and his loyal dog stumbled into her mansion, she'd given them the gift of purpose. Fair trade, Marcus thought. You gave me a reason to keep living. I'll make sure your story keeps changing lives. Atlas sighed contentedly, already half asleep, secure in the knowledge that his human was okay tonight. That they'd helped someone. That tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they could rest. Marcus closed his eyes and for once, sleep came easy. No nightmares that night. Just dreams of roses growing in gardens. Of light filling rooms that had been dark too long. Of voices speaking truth in spaces built for silence. And of a woman he'd never met smiling at him across decades, grateful her death hadn't been the end of her fight, that someone had finished what she started, that the secrets she'd protected with her life were finally free. The morning sun broke soft through the window, painting everything gold. A new day, new purposes, new lives beginning in the spaces where old ones ended. And Atlas, loyal Atlas, guardian and friend, slept peacefully beside the man who'd bought a mansion for $100 and found a $250 million secret that changed the world. But the real treasure, Marcus knew now, wasn't the gold or the evidence or even the justice finally being served. The real treasure was purpose, community, second chances, proof that broken people could heal by helping others heal, that trauma survivors could build sanctuaries from their pain, that loyalty and love and stubborn refusal to quit could transform tombs into temples. One veteran at a time, one story at a time, one act of courage at a time. That was the true legacy of the Marilyn Monroe Truth and Advocacy Center. And it had started with a dog who wouldn't stop digging. Because sometimes the most valuable things in life are buried beneath the surface, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. Someone like Marcus Reid and his loyal dog, Atlas. Together, they'd found their purpose. And they'd keep fighting to protect it, one day at a time, until their final breath. Because some battles are worth everything. If this story moved you, drop a 1 in the comments. If you'd like to see more stories about veterans, loyal dogs, and second chances that change the world, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. More courage, more hope, more proof that the darkest secrets can't survive the light when someone refuses to let them stay buried.